Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
How many of us have grown up in the shadow of a depressed parent? What's the lasting damage? But most importantly, how do we move beyond it? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. With us this hour to explore the devastating impact of being and growing up with a depressed parent is Dr. SHOSHANA Bennett. Following life-threatening postpartum depressions, Dr. Bennett helped pioneer the field of maternal mental health in the U.S. She founded and led national and international organizations, plus authored 4 books on the topic, the latest being Children of the Depressed. As a clinical psychologist and parent advocate, she has educated professionals and the public for over 3 decades, emphasizing prevention and wellness. Dr. Shosh earned 2 master's degrees, a doctorate degree, 3 teaching certificates, and is a licensed psychologist. She has helped over 20,000 parents worldwide. Her website, drshosh.com. Dr. Shosh, thanks for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Gwilda.
We should have fun with this topic. It's so important, and it hasn't really been covered all that well.
You're absolutely right. It's a deep topic. It's a serious topic, but so important. And thank you for doing your show, so we get to educate.
It's so important, absolutely. So, how did you first become interested in depression?
You know, I was a special education teacher. I was teaching at the community colleges in the San Francisco Bay Area, and all I did was have a baby, and I lost myself. I had never been depressed before, and my mental health plummeted down to a place that was horrifying for a number of years. Remember that this is back in the 80s, so there wasn't an internet. You know, there was nobody had a computer. I couldn't Google anything. So I was surrounded by ignorance and a lot of criticism due to that. And so it really developed out of my personal experience. And I vowed to myself when I found out that other countries were far ahead of us, I started getting my hands on everything that had been translated into English and realized that the United States was far behind much of the world. And that's how my passion, even while I was still depressed and anxious, I had to use it for something good, frankly, or it probably would have destroyed me and my family.
I hear you there. So, for our listeners and our audience, what is postpartum depression?
Postpartum depression is, first of all, the most common complication of childbirth, which is a huge statement. It happens to be true.
Seriously?
Yes, the most common complication of childbirth. It is a disorder, meaning it goes over the line from the very normal baby blues into something that really needs professional intervention, not necessarily medication, but we can get into all that if you're interested later. But it does take a plan of wellness, a strategy to move through it. It does not necessarily go away on its own. And we're talking about 1 in 7 new moms and about 1 in 10 dads experience postpartum depression.
Well, I was just going to ask if it's hormonal related, but if the dads are suffering from it too, there's something else going on. What causes it?
Yeah, you know, the reproductive hormones do play a huge role for the biological mother, but that's not the only factor. If there is a previous history of any mental health challenge, it automatically makes a person, dad or mom, high risk. If there's depression in the past, if there's anxiety, if there's bipolar disorder, if there's obsessive compulsive disorder, etc. What's one of the most stressful events in a couple's life it's bringing a baby home. So whatever's hanging around in the genes, this is when it's going to surface during the perinatal period, both during either or both pregnancy or the first year postpartum.
It seems like, in our society, having a baby is a wonderful event, and all the joys and all the cutesy stuff is really emphasized.
Yeah.
But then there's the long nights where you're awake and, just the whole thing, particularly if you have a child that has, say, colic or something. I mean, it's so stressful. Why do you suppose that's kind of brushed over and we're supposed to focus on the joy, happy, happy, joy, joy? Doesn't that play in here?
You bet it does. Often when I'm working with clients, I will focus first on helping them throw out the myths of motherhood, myths of parenthood. One of them is my body will regulate to sleep deprivation. No, it doesn't. And it can cause depression and other problems. I'm really glad you mentioned sleep deprivation. You're right. I mean, again, the myth is this is supposed to be the happiest time in our lives. I'm not saying that some parents don't experience that. Sometimes they do, and that's lovely. But it's the expectation that gets us in trouble, because often it does not feel like that. This can be the toughest time or one of the toughest periods in our lives. That's when the feelings of failure, inadequacy, guilt, all that stuff can take over. And again, often once we clear out those myths and parents feel a lot more normal as to, wow, this doesn't have to be the happiest time. The happiest time can come later after the adjustment period. Often that's all that it takes.
But the myths stand between us and that, and we start beating ourselves, oh, I should be a better parent. I shouldn't be so upset about this.
Right.
Yeah. So there was one thing that I'm, of course, a mother, and I decided that every time you got pregnant, you developed a new organ, and it was called the guilt organ. Okay. And furthermore, every time you got pregnant, you got another one, but they never went away.
Mm.
What causes the guilt associated with parenting?
I'm not a big believer in guilt. I will tell you right now. And I think it's actually avoidable. At least it's treatable. My goal for the people I work with is to be free from guilt. Look, if there's something that one needs to take responsibility for, that's something completely different, right? You step up, you take care of it, you fix it, and you move on. But guilt is taught. Guilt is not a natural emotion. It's a way to manipulate and control, period. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
churches do it, parents do it, teachers do it, people in authority do it. But it's not helpful. To me, if there's something that needs to be fixed, skip the I'm a bad person, I'm a bad parent, in this case, stuff, and go right to what can I do to making it better. Often new parents, especially new mothers, equate the intensity of their guilt with love. Guilt and love are not the same thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? Because one, for instance, is taking care of oneself, doing self-nurture stuff, taking regular breaks, as they should do, to prevent depletion and burnout. Often there's guilt coming up, like, my needs shouldn't matter anymore. That's another very damaging myth. You asked me about myths. It should all be about the baby now, So I help them throw the guilt out and teach them this is the most loving thing you can possibly do for your family, to make sure you are healthy, grounded, happy. That is the greatest gift you can give your entire family. That's something to be proud of, not to be guilty about.
So, what are the treatments for postpartum? I'm sure it's changed since the 80s. It kind of goes through phases of what's the most effective treatment. But what are the treatments for postpartum depression?
I'll answer the question starting out with, there's no cookie cutter approach. In other words, every parent has their own set of factors. I mean, we're all different. We're individuals. So there's a set of things that need to be looked at first, but then it's very individualized as to what the other puzzle pieces might be. Certainly we are looking at the hormonal aspect, especially with mothers. We are making sure the myths of parenthood are out of there. We're looking at sleep at night, and I emphasize at night, lengthening the amount of time, uninterrupted nighttime sleep. That can make a huge difference. Sometimes that's the only thing that needs to be done. So figuring out ways to lengthen those chunks of time, even for breastfeeding moms. We're looking at exercise. We're looking at nutrition. I mean, there are specific combinations of foods that are fabulous for mental health during this period of time. We're looking at taking regular breaks, as recurring events every week. So there's, when your next respite time is coming, right? I mean, when you think about when we go to work outside the home, and you can look at the clock and you're having a hard day and you go, okay, I can hang on for the next hour and a half and then I'm out of here, right? It can stop you from snapping at the next person who comes over to your desk. Well, parenting is going to be a burnout unless you know that when your next break is coming. This can be the most challenging time, of your life, the toughest job possible. Medication is also used often when especially when one has had a history of depression or other mental health disorder, and they're already on medication. It can be continued, because again, if anything's going to show up or
It
get
will.
worse
It will.
during this
Yeah.
time.
Well, we're out of
Exactly.
time. We're out of time in this segment. We'll have to pick up on this topic on the other side of a short break. Dr. Shosh and I will return very shortly, so don't you go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Do you have the baby blues? With us this hour discussing postpartum depression is the author of Children of the Depressed, Dr. Shoshana Bennett. Dr. Shosh, we were talking about different treatments and different causing factors for
Right.
postpartum depression. I wanted to bring up breastfeeding,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Because there's a lot of hormonal stuff that goes on when you're breastfeeding.
Yes.
And if you have to interrupt breastfeeding, or if you, for some reason, don't breastfeed, whatever, does that impact the hormonal balances and therefore the depression?
It's very individual. There's not a general way to answer that. Sometimes, yes. But often, women are thinking, well, I'll give up the breastfeeding or the pumping, and then I'll get, that'll cure me. Not necessarily. And also, just
I would think
warning.
it'd be the other way around, quite
Well,
frankly. But
well, sometimes yes, especially when the ceasing of the breastfeeding is done too quickly, it can really throw somebody into a greater depression or anxiety situation. So again, you want to be working with a team. This is a specialty. It's not good enough just to go to any excellent therapist or MD. You really want to work with a perinatal specialist who can help you come up with a plan. Sometimes women give up breastfeeding, to answer your question. And as we're saying, that is not what happens. And then they're sad about stopping and right. So again, it's very individual, and how the system works. Treatment we were starting to talk about there are also alternative treatments of all kinds, complementary treatments. So often, speaking of breastfeeding, women are afraid to go get some help, thinking they're just going to stick me on an antidepressant and I'm breastfeeding. I don't want to do that. So I just want your audience to know that often, with a comprehensive plan of wellness, a great strategy, because the whole answer never comes out of a bottle anyway, right? If a doctor's going to prescribe an antidepressant, for instance, they should also prescribe a perinatal therapist. It's not enough. But often medication is not needed. Not that there's anything wrong with it if one needs it for wellness. But I just wanted to put that out there, that there are different therapies, along with the psychoeducation and explanations and the natural, the sleep, exercise, nutrition, breaks, etc., that can help her get to 100% wellness. That's what we're going for, 100%.
So you said something that perked my interest, and that was perinatal therapist. Is
Yes.
that an actual field now, and is there an education in it for people?
Yes, there is.
Yes.
Postpartum Support International, one of the organizations I was president of a number of years ago, they have an excellent training program. I do other trainings, which one can take a look at if they wish. But yes, this is a specialty. So even if you're going to if a mom goes to a therapist who specializes in women's health, it's not enough. So you really want to focus on a perinatal mental health specialist. Yes.
That makes sense because it's such a complicated issue.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, you get the guilt, whether you want it or not, is mixed in there, and feelings of failure, and this isn't what I thought I signed up for, and on it goes. On top of whatever imbalance is causing the depression to start out with.
Exactly. Maybe there's a loss. I mean, sometimes there is a miscarriage. All the body knows is that the pregnancy ended. And by the way, anything that can happen postpartum can happen during pregnancy. But right now, talking about postpartum, the perinatal specialist would be able to handle that type of issue. Sometimes it's not all about grief. The system itself, the biology can change, and one can be in a depression that's separate from the grief following perinatal loss, if that all makes sense.
It does, and I don't know, losing a child at any point is absolutely devastating. My heart goes out to those people, and
Yes.
it has to throw you off. You know,
Yes.
um, How does postpartum depression differ from regular depression? I mean, we know that they're a mixed bag when you get
Mhm.
postpartum depression, but what's the difference? How can you tell the difference?
One of the biggest myths out there, even with psychotherapists who haven't studied this particular area, what you will hear from them is depression. And there's no difference. It just happens, postpartum depression just happens to occur following the birth of a baby. But there's no difference at all. Not true. Anybody who has had depression previously and then develops a postpartum depression will tell you these are very different. For one, with the mom, the reproductive hormones, the endocrine system is involved in a way that it isn't at other times in our lives. So, for instance, with postpartum depression, mom might feel fine at 10 in the morning, be horribly anxious at 2 p.m., for instance, be depressed as anything at 6. We are up and down and all around. That's one of the hallmarks of the perinatal depression. Usually, with the other depressions, it's a constant flat. It's just down all the time. Not true with perinatal. So that is one of the biggest differences. And also treatment can be different. Although one might use, for instance, an antidepressant or some of the alternatives that they might use at other times in our lives, it might be for a very shorter duration. Dosage is different. So again, that's why it takes specialists.
So let's talk about the dads. Okay, you
Okay.
wouldn't think that a dad would suffer from postnatal depression, but apparently you said they do. How does that work? What's going on there?
They certainly can. Well, first of all, if they have a history of any mental health challenge, even a family history, they are at higher risk. Because sometimes the moms call me and say, "I'm really doing great. I'm really worried about my husband or my boyfriend." 1 in 10, generally, is the statistic for
Okay,
dads,
that
and
many.
that many. And if the mom is depressed, his rate jumps up from 24 to 50% chance
Oof.
of getting depressed. So that's why whenever possible, unless there's a reason not to, I will bring in the partner very early on in treatment to make sure that he has his own support, because often he's holding down the fort, right? He's the pillar that she's depending on. He's maybe he's doing the work, and then he's coming home and he's taking care of her and the baby, and maybe he's doing the housework, whatever else. Even she might be on leave, but he is picking up the pieces. And if he doesn't get his own support, breaks and etc., and somebody to talk to and somebody to unload to, he can start to slip down as she recovers. So we want to make sure, because he's holding it together. So she's recovering. And then he goes, oh my God, and everything starts to deteriorate. So for all kinds of reasons, dads need support. Look, they've just become a new parent too. And often in this society, which I'll get into if you'd like me to, we have really done a very bad number on fathers.
Oh, yeah, don't get me started. We've done a very bad number on men in general. So, yeah.
Correct.
So it sounds like it would be a very complicated issue because not only are we dealing with, all the stressors, but also the relationship issue. So, say for instance, if the wife has really been the support for the husband, and all of a sudden all her focus is on the baby, he can feel like he's hanging out in the wind. There's so many interrelationship things that play in there. Is there a special therapy for couples as they're going through this process?
Absolutely. And some of us work with couples, and for that very reason, because there are so many factors. I mean, there's the whole romance. What happens to that? I mean, often it just gets snuffed out. That's put way back on the on that burner, right? Because it's all about the baby now, and so the couple can really get lost. He might, yes, feel like a second class citizen. That happens quite a bit. So there are definite things that the couple needs to do. Yes, the mom needs support, the dad needs support, and they also need to make sure that the intimacy doesn't disappear.
And so how easy that is in between diapers and bottles and midnight squalls. Let's talk about grandparents. We have a little time left in this segment. How about grandparents? Do they suffer with depression or anxiety?
They certainly can. I work with grandparents quite a bit these days. It never used to be recognized as a thing, just like way back in the 80s when I started to pioneer this field. Moms, we weren't talking about moms either. Yes, grandparents are often raising their children,
I
raising their
know.
grandchildren, right?
I know.
Often that is the situation, or at least they're doing a lot of caretaking. It's very interesting what happened when my daughter became pregnant. When she became pregnant, I started to get some of the perinatal OCD symptoms back. Was it biochemical? No, I wasn't the pregnant one, but it was very interesting what got rekindled. It was fascinating. I was just kind of watching, as a researcher and as a psychologist, but at the same time as the grandparent going through it. So that is a fascinating and emerging new field.
Well, we're about out of time in this segment, but I can certainly see how that might happen. And particularly in your case, when you had such a horrific time with it, it's like PTSD, every stage your daughter goes through, because you're so connected anyway, probably brings up the trauma that you suffered at the same point.
Correct. Yes.
Just amazing. Just amazing. And the same, you don't have to medicate grandparents as a rule, but don't they need therapy and support?
Definitely support. I'm a big believer, of course, in working with the right therapist. I'm very, we in the field are very wellness oriented. At least we should be, and not disorder. Yes, you need to be educated about it, but it's about producing results.
Absolutely.
So learning about what's going on and then
Well,
moving forward.
it is that time for another station break. Dr. Shosh and I will be right back to continue this discussion. You stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Do you feel trapped? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing parental guilt and feeling trapped is Dr. Shoshana Bennett. Her website, drshosh.com. Dr. Shosh, when you are around someone that's being difficult or making you feel trapped and uptight, in normal situations, you always have the option of walking away. With an infant, not so much. Is it normal to feel trapped when you're going through tough times with your infant, like colic or restlessness or waking up a lot at night?
Every parent is going to feel some of that, and definitely with an infant who is higher needs, we'll put it. Can that be more challenging? Absolutely. And what the parent needs to know is that a feeling is just a feeling. It doesn't make you a bad parent. So if sometimes you have a feeling of, I don't want to be this person or this person's mom or dad, just get me out of here. I'll pick it up when it's 5 years old. Those kinds of feelings. Yes, I will normalize that. But again, it can go over the line if the parent doesn't get proper help and not only be able to vent, but have a real strategy for helping them through. For instance, make sure there's a plan for getting out, physical help, not only emotional help, but who's coming over to help you, who can take over for a night, when are you getting a break so you can go off with your friends. I mean, those kinds of things. So yes, I mean, this happens all the time. It's a matter of degree when we talk about what's very normal as opposed to what needs extra intervention.
Speaking of intervention, um, some people can get so pushed that suddenly abusive behavior starts to become an issue. How can you tell that that's going to be a risk, and what are your options there?
Mm. You mean abuse towards children?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because often in those situations, not always, there's a lot of tension with the parents, with the caretakers also, and it can kind of spill over onto the kid. Most definitely, there needs to be a community around parents. Always, actually, there need to be people that you can count on. So again, to prevent burnout, because often with burnout and depletion or extra anxiety because of it, that's when we go over that line and start dropping that kid a little too hard into the crib. That isn't necessarily abuse, but
It's getting there.
that's a signal, right? It's
Mhm.
a signal. Let it be, rather than going into guilt when you start to feel those feelings, say, okay, I got a sign. I really need to get some help. So don't waste time beating yourself up. Just know that this can happen to anybody, and we need to prevent it from going any further, and you reach out as fast as you can. Again, I'm a big one for perinatal therapists, because they understand this stuff, I think, better than most. And but you need a community. Don't suffer in silence, or your entire family, not just the kids, will suffer.
So, also, we were talking about triggers, and unfortunately, there's a number of people that were abused as infants, but of course don't remember it. But then that gets triggered when their own infant is on the scene.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that?
Yes. And often I will hear from clients, I don't want my depression that I'm experiencing now to leak over onto my child. And that's often why they reach out for help to begin with. What I help them do is focus on their wellness, because you don't have to worry about what's going to be modeled to the child if you are well. So I'm saying you are the focus, not your kid. Well, of course, you're taking care of your child and doing what needs to be done, but you need to work on, I tell them, your own. I will help you work on whatever's coming up, whatever unhealed stuff, whatever raw stuff is coming up for you. Let's get that up and out so you can go on with your happy life, and you will model all the right things to your kid. You don't have to worry about that intergenerational thing that often keeps going time after time.
And there's nothing like children to trigger it, is there? I mean, they know
And
every button.
it's true. And although, when somebody is in the middle of a crisis, they don't like to hear, "Oh, this is an opportunity for you." It is. I mean, obviously we have the utmost compassion, and nobody knows this better than I, frankly. I was very close to again, never having experienced this before. The thoughts that were going through my mind were horrifying. It's like, what kind of a mother would be thinking these things? Because again, there was no education. So once you teach, here's what's happening, here's why, and here's what you can do about it, and help them step up to take control, make a commitment to their wellness, it's tremendously empowering. Because when you're thinking, nothing I can do about this, that's when helplessness and hopelessness comes in.
You've mentioned several times, having that community, having that support system. But in our modern day society,
Mm,
oftentimes we've moved far away from family.
mm,
We've been at work, and so the people that are at work are not necessarily geared towards. You take time off for pregnancy, and you're kind of out of sight, out of mind, because
right.
it was a work relationship kind of friendship. Um, where can people find support groups, even?
It's a great. I will answer that. And often, one of the puzzle pieces, for many of my clients, is because they have moved. They just moved to another state while they were pregnant. Not a good idea if you can avoid it. Then all their support is in a completely different part of the world. Uh, uh, Often in faith communities, neighbors. You mentioned family. Family, sometimes they can be wonderful supports, and sometimes the people we think should be the best supports aren't. So what often brainstorming with folks, saying, who came to your baby shower, who maybe is reaching out, but you say, nah, I don't need that. The whole self-reliance myth, I should be able to handle this myself, right? All of that stuff, I'll help them get over that, so they can start saying, yes, thank you, when can you come over? Somebody who they might never have thought they would be relying on. And so usually, almost always, there are people, uh, and if not, I will help them find groups, or different agencies. There's almost always somebody or a place that can support. But again, what depression makes us feel alone. So here, at the time of our greatest vulnerability, right? We're thinking there's nobody. I'm all by myself. And often I'll say, no, actually, you're not. Remember, you told me about your friend who offered to come and spend a couple of nights so you could get some sleep? How about it?
Yeah, it's when we get in that mindset for whatever reason, but particularly probably postpartum, all of our options seem to disappear. It's like, if we're problem solving for somebody else, we got great ideas. But when it's us, it's like we just drop into helplessness, hopelessness, victim, and boy, that's a downward spiral, isn't it?
Absolutely. And suicide is a big problem
Ugh.
postpartum. It's a huge, yeah, that's what we of course need to guard against. That's why I'm a big one for don't suffer in silence. Don't just wait for this to go away. Right? Because often they think, oh, when I get my period again, I'll feel better. Oh, when I stop breastfeeding, it'll go. Oh, when the baby smiles at me, or when I go back to work, whatever. Don't wait. This stuff does not necessarily go away on its own. The faster you get the right kind of support, whether that's medical, or just psychological, or a group, whatever it is that you need, get it. Your prognosis is better. It's better for the whole family. Yeah.
So a good point here is, so what's the best way to tell if someone is on that slippery slope, yourself or your partner? What are the signs that somebody's starting to slide beyond just the normal, I'm stressed out blues, into postpartum depression?
There are two main ways you can tell the difference between the normal baby blues with a disorder, when it's gone over the line. The normal baby blues, which most new parents experience, certainly new moms, about 80%, as a matter of fact, it doesn't feel good, but it's mild, for one. So the severity is not huge. It's mild, and it goes away. It should be gone by about 2 weeks or 3 weeks at the outset, postpartum. So those are the two main ways. If you're feeling like I did, once that placenta was delivered, I plummeted. It
Oh, wow.
overlapped the baby blues time, but it was severe. Then you don't wait. You don't wait. You reach out for help right away. um, uh, or if the baby blues doesn't go away and it spirals into something more severe. So again, it's the time, it's the duration and the severity that we're looking at. And again, you go for the specialized help. So sometimes when this is happening, just going to a regular new parents group really isn't enough. You need that specialized help again.
And we're about out of time in this segment, but aren't mothers, first time parents, more prone to let it slide, not realize what's going on?
Often, but not necessarily. Postpartum depression can happen after the birth of any of the children. So she might not have had postpartum depression the first 3 times, but on her fourth, she has a very bad situation. So this can happen at any time. That's why we need to educate all people who are ready for childbearing, even if they're not even pregnant yet. We
It should be
educate, so that you can tell what's normal and what's over that line when you should reach out.
part of the childbirth classes.
You
So
bet.
it's time for that station break. So please stay with us as Dr. Shosh and I continue to explore depression and its impact on both adults and their children. Why don't kids come with an instruction manual? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Shoshana Bennett. Her website, drshosh.com. Um, Dr. Shosh, what are the major myths, what most damaging myths really about parenting?
I'm going to launch right from what you just said, that this is instinctive, that parenting is instinctive. That if so, we wouldn't have so many parenting books out there, right? If this were instinctive, maybe intuitive, maybe we can rely on an intuition, but we're not geese. We don't just automatically do stuff out of instinct. We need to learn.
More is the pity.
Right, because so often there's that that inappropriate, I'll say, guilt of I should know what the cries mean, all of that. And also my needs don't matter anymore. If I love the kid enough, I should be able to do this all by myself. And breastfeeding should always be easy. Women have been doing this for thousands of years, and my life isn't going to change. I'm just going to throw that kid on my back and do that hike up that mountain. Now, I'm not saying that stuff never happens. Sometimes, it's easier than we think. But again, it's the expectations that get us in trouble, because when it doesn't look that way and feel that way and sound that way, that's when the feelings of inadequacy set in. And that's what can often cause depression and anxiety.
So is it easier sometimes for children that aren't the last born or only children because they've seen their parents parenting and they've seen what it's like to have an infant in the house? Can that be helpful?
It can be, but I'm going to avoid giving a too general an answer there. It is so dependent on what other factors are happening in the home. But could it be? Yes, it can. And if I may just jump back to the grandparent stuff, when I led the first postpartum depression group in the country, in my living room in Northern California. Again, there wasn't an internet, but the mothers of my clients, or not my clients yet, the participants in the group, the moms of the women who were depressed, would often come as supports. I would watch their mouths drop open. It's like, oh, I went through this also. And suddenly, it was like all the puzzle pieces for them suddenly fit. They didn't have any help at that time. So again, we're talking about generational things and birth orders and stuff. It's really quite fascinating. But education is at the very, very top of what every new parent or pregnant couple or couple even thinking about pregnancy should have. They should have a flyer in their hand or something emailed to them so that they're not worried about themselves. Because the problem is the lack of education, not the education.
Forewarned is forearmed. So if you are a depressed parent and you're in depression and you're doing your best to get out of it and you're doing all the right things, but what can we do in the interim to keep our depression from negatively impacting our children? Not just the one that we just had, but the ones that we've already had.
Right. Right. Because the consequences of untreated parental depression, well documented. So again, very important that you get some real help in getting a wellness strategy as fast as possible. You need regular breaks. This is true for all parents, actually. So this can prevent depression, not only help heal it, I'd like to say. So regular, I don't care if it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 2 to 4, whatever you need, line up whatever you can for regular recurring respite time for you. Know the people and their numbers, right? Stick it on your phone or whatever. The people you can really count on for emotional support, not the ones that you think ought to, but the ones you really can. You want to nibble throughout the day some really solid protein with a complex carb, for instance. I won't go into all of that. That's a whole talk in and of itself. But feeding your brain on a regular basis with certain nutrients can make a big difference. Have some respite whenever possible for at least a couple of nights, for even half the night. I mean, 5 hours of uninterrupted nighttime sleep can make the difference between depression and no depression. Am I answering your question, by the way?
Well, you are, but I think where I'd like to go with it is, next question would be, what are the symptoms? What is the impact? What do we see in our children when they have had a depressed parent?
An untreated depression in the parents,
Hmm.
we often see that kid avoiding. They might be in preschool under the table, not participating. They might be more fearful. There can be neurological problems, developmental problems, psychological problems. They are much higher risk for problems, certainly by the time they're teenagers. So it is serious when parents do not get help. So that's why I'm saying, so much of this can be avoided. Get help, not only for yourself, but for the rest of your family, so that you don't pass down those kinds of things. But yes, it makes the risk for the children in all areas, learning problems, all kinds of issues. So you can help avoid those by focusing on you getting well.
So it's that time of the show, Dr. Shosh, when I get to ask, what's your mission?
Oh, definitely for parents never to go through what my family did way back. So to be able to launch yourselves in as healthy way as possible, and to take care of yourselves, physically, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, because the happy and healthy parents will be raising happy and healthy children moving forward.
So, from the descriptions that you gave me of children, what the signs and symptoms and damage you see in children that have had untreated depressed parents, it sounds like it's almost kind of parallel with abandonment issues, like the parent just isn't there for them.
Yes, their bodies might be there, but emotionally, I mean, I will tell you that one of the main passions is watching out for the children. I teach early childhood development, have for many years. One of my children developed a disorder, an attachment disorder,
Mm.
because physically I was there, emotionally I wasn't. I could barely get eye contact with her. So again, one of my biggest passions is taking care of the parents so the kids will be okay.
If you are a parent and you're in depression and you know all signs, you're trying to work through it, but you're still there, what are the steps you can take with your child or your children
Mhm.
to mitigate the damage?
And again, this is with them getting professional help.
Yes, for
Along
sure.
with that, sometimes massage, infant massage, so that it builds in the touch can be wonderful, and different kinds of parent-child activities, not just physical, but music classes where you can really start to enjoy your children, because often with depression there is no enjoyment, and so to nurture those kinds of activities, sometimes actually a developmental psychologist can help that relationship. I know it took years to put our family back together. This can wreak havoc on marriages, which also can affect the child, of course. So it's not just parent child, it's the couple relationship needs to be well as well. But again, there are various activities and things one can do during the day. Very simple things. Yoga classes with kids. I mean, all kinds of things can really help the feelings of nurturing the bonding that sometimes depression can really not necessarily prevent, but deter.
There's things like, and this has been around for a while, mom taught swim. There's a perfect example of something that you could do.
Exactly
It
right.
involves hanging on to your baby, but it involves a
Right.
new experience. We could stir
Yes.
the mother up, and there
Yes.
are things, but
And
again,
exercise, we can help her endorphins. It's not gonna hurt anything. It might not be all she needs, but it's sure not gonna hurt, and maybe for that half-hour class and 20 minutes later, she's feeling better, I'll take it.
if we do those little things that
Yeah.
bring us out even just for a little while, does it help us gain perspective?
It can, because even if you get what I call windows, even a few seconds or a couple of minutes, and well, as we get better, our windows expand. But even just at the beginning, a little flash of, "Ooh, maybe I can do this." Maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe, "Oh, she really looks cute." Those kind of windows, those flashes of normalcy and enjoyment, that can give hope. And it's that we want to build in. Sometimes my clients need to rely on my hope, my perspective, until they can see for themselves. They don't have to take my word for it anymore. Those windows, they've got the windows for themselves. They're proving it to themselves, and then they launch forward.
Again, that perspective, wherever it comes from, isn't that really, really important?
Absolutely.
It's so important. Well, we're just about out of time altogether. But thank you. I mean, it's to me, it's just phenomenal what you've managed to achieve from your own devastation and devastating experience with postpartum depression. And you serve as a beautiful example for people to take their pain and transfer it into healing for many, many people. So thank you so much for what you do and what you've brought.
Thank you, Gwilda, so much.
Dr. Shosh has been our guest this hour. She's a pioneer in the field of maternal health and author of 4 books, including Children of the Depressed. You can find out more about Dr. Shosh, where you can find her books and all she has to offer by visiting her website, drshosh.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy our past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But most importantly, please be sure to tune in wherever you found us next time as we continue this mission, bringing information, resources, and support to our rapidly evolving world.